Welcome to Africa Event Connect, the podcast where we unpack the real work behind Africa's business events industry through the voices of the leaders that are building it. Now, this is a space for conversations about scale, leadership, and infrastructure and policy, and what it truly takes to deliver events that matter, not just locally, but globally. I'm your host, Projeni Pather, exhibition organizer, industry advocate, and someone deeply invested in positioning Africa as a credible, competitive destination for global business events. Now, today's episode is a powerful one because we're talking about an event that puts South Africa, an African eventing capability, firmly under the global spotlight. My guest today is Adele Hartdegen, CEO of the Johannesburg Expo Centre and Dogan Events. Now, last year, the Johannesburg Expo Centre successfully hosted the G20 Summit, and that's one of the most complex, high security, and internationally scrutinized events any venue can be entrusted with. This wasn't just a logistical win, it was a credibility moment for the venue, for the city, and for the African continent and the events industry as a whole. So Adele, welcome to Africa Event Connect. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Projeni. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, and you're going to have so much to share. I really don't know where to begin, but let's start at the moment where it became real, right? Now, hosting a global event like G20 doesn't begin with floor plans or security briefings, but begins with that moment of realization that this is actually happening. And I can only imagine the sense of responsibility and expectations and understanding the global attention that would come with that, right? When did it first hit you that the Johannesburg Expo Centre was going to host the G20? And what was your immediate reaction as an event organizer at heart?
The Johannesburg Expo Centre actually researches a lot of these international events to see where are they traveling to so that we can try and, let me say, get ahead of the curve in terms of understanding the event even before it's confirmed for any of the specific provinces or the venues in South Africa. So we first became aware of G20 in October 2024 when it was announced that South Africa was going to host. And shortly after, in December, they started issuing some bidding documents with specs where it was obviously open market that the venues had to start submitting their presentations and go through the RFP process. Prior to the heads of state, which is what we've now become famous for, the G20 heads of state, we actually first hosted the ministerial summit in February. And that came very short notice. From appointing to the event actually opening, we had 10 days. And this was also an event of scale with a customized plenary and all the trimmings that they wanted. So during the ministerial summit, we sort of had the sense that this was our test case for the heads of state summit. Although the client didn't say anything about it potentially coming to us, we sort of read between the lines that we had submitted our bid the year before and executing the ministerial summit seamlessly would put us in a good position. So going through the ministerial summit and then realizing that the heads of state could come our way, we started getting excited and nervous, because if a project like this does not make you nervous, it probably means that you do not understand the project to begin with. I think it'll scare the living daylights out of any heavyweight event organizer. And then towards about 3 months out from the actual Heads of State Summit is when the confirmation started coming through from the Department of International Relations. And we had a very short moment of celebration followed by complete and utter panic.
Oh, wow. I mean, it just shows that major global events, they don't just start with the logistics, right? They start with trust. And that's what you've built through the ministerial summit, right? And that is just so important, right? In this industry, trust. Yeah. Well, so let's go into the details. That was overwhelming. I can only imagine how you felt and how the team felt. Excited, overwhelmed, and that reality. And then we all go into action mode, right? So let's go into that. what makes the G20 different? So for many people in the events industry, like a large international conference already sounds complex, right? But the G20, it sits in a completely different category altogether, right? With layers that go far beyond any kind of traditional event delivery that we're comfortable with. So for people outside government and diplomacy, what makes the G20 fundamentally different?
G20, I think, as an event, depending on the country where it's run, comes with its own set of complications, with, as you mentioned, especially when you have people of protocol on site. The South African one specifically, because it was the first time it was being hosted on the African continent. The whole feel of the event and how it would be executed immediately changed when we were able to grasp how the president actually wanted to position South Africa within this event. So that in itself came with a whole bunch of complexities, because you are receiving heads of state who is used to a certain caliber of food, facility, security, and then we still have to translate that into what our culture represents and what heritage we want to show at the event. So that's what made G20 very interesting for us, is to see the blend of technology, but still with the warmth of African hospitality. We didn't create these stark spaces. It was all very welcoming. And it's an event that the finer details, if you have to start breaking it down, when we do these large political events, there's always multiple work streams. And these multiple work streams can go across multiple government departments. So you will be dealing with a security stream, an IT stream, there's a marketing stream, catering is a life of its own altogether. The protocol teams and all of these, I'd say 12 to 13 work streams was at a minimum within this event. We sit as the central function to coordinate that as the venue and to make sure that they all understand the implications of each other's decisions, because it's like a domino or a ripple effect. So that definitely came as a surprising complexity. Even though we've done events like this before, it was never to this magnitude.
Right.
What also makes G20 very interesting is the way they set up the venues and the translation that goes with that. Okay. So in total, we had set up 172 different spaces, all with decor elements, furniture, carpeting, premium finishes. And then not all of those spaces, but majority of those spaces had to receive simultaneous translation in an area that was located far from the plenary itself, and then be broken out into 9 languages. So basically our AV provider, who did an amazing job, they had to configure the system in such a way that you would be able to select channel 1 for French, channel 2 for Portuguese, and it would have to run as the plenary was running, because you've got these, what they call country officers, that's monitoring the progress in the plenary itself. And then, the different setups with protocols and security convoys, it just gives you a complete different mindset as to what a conventional conference layout would look like when you are hosting prominent corporates, where people arrive in one vehicle versus convoys that arrive in 5 to 6 to 7 vehicles. So all of those complexities made it such a unique event. And we really felt the weight of what this event meant to our country, which put it on a whole different level, because throughout the build and hosting the event on the weekend, we were firmly in our bubble about, we have our moment to shine or completely burn it to a crisp.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting project.
So let's look at what are some of the non-negotiables on this event.
So from the presidency side, the non-negotiables were a lot of the finishes in how the president wanted the country to be represented. So the devil was definitely in the details and making sure that all of the finer things were in place, and working all of that within a set budget, which comes with a challenge of its own.
Yep.
And it required a lot of creativity from us and the design teams to make sure that we make it look premium, but we stay within the parameters.
So that's an interesting one, because it's nice to see that whether it's a premium event or a mid-level or a small event, always juggling between like wanting the Rolls Royce for a medium-sized budget or a small budget is always the challenge for us as organizers, right? So it doesn't change for G20.
Not at all. So it's a very difficult event, I think, to design because we had people that, when you talk about the non-negotiables, from the creative side, obviously they focus on it has to be so pretty and so beautiful, but they don't necessarily have the background of the functionality that's required. And to give a simple example, the plenary itself, when we delivered it, we were on revision 21 of the drawings, going from the pretty to adding seats to how it had to be scaled.
Yes.
And simple stuff that people in our industry do not always consider. When you have people of protocol, you never build any structure with stairs. It's always ramps, because you are dealing with presidents and ministers. They're normally not people that are young, so you don't want to create tripping hazards. So everything that you design has to be with the thought of it being beautiful, but also functional. And then hoping that the security cluster will approve it. And they do look at every single thing.
Wow. Now, talking about security, how intense is that security and protocol layer?
Unlike anything I've ever seen or experienced before, I think before the event opened on the Saturday, let's say by the Thursday, Friday, we probably had more than 2,000 people in police and different levels of crime intelligence, presidential security spread throughout the precinct, never mind the premises. But I have to commend the security cluster for how they conducted the security setup. Each of our venues, so they secured the outer perimeter of the venue and then created different zones. And on all of our facilities, each access area to a hall was monitored by facial recognition. So not just your access badge that you're required to go in, but if the system did not recognize your face, you could not go in. And all of that was manned by the presidential security workstream. So some of us that were very fortunate, myself and some of my critical team members, we had a level 8 clearance, which means we could move everywhere. And we felt like men in black for the weekend because it was an honor to be able to float in these spaces. And you see the presidents that you always just see on the news channels walking past you casually. So it was nice to see the security so well implemented, executed without any incidents. We had 0 security or safety incidents during the event. Some small ones leading up to the event, but nothing that was concerning to anyone. And still in the spaces, it didn't feel like people were being watched and monitored and put into boxes. So they really executed it exceptionally well.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, it just goes to show that these global summits, I mean, they require a completely different mindset, right? The precision involved, the governance, and 0 tolerance for error, right? You cannot get it wrong. You cannot get it wrong. So the devil is in the detail. The devil's in the detail. Now let's talk about the venue itself and getting the venue ready and the infrastructure ready. I mean, when a venue is entrusted with such an event, it's like not just because you have the right size or capacity, it's because it's being tested on the systems and the resilience of the venue and its ability to perform under global scrutiny. I mean, those are some of the reasons why Johannesburg Expo Centre was selected. Now, so from a venue perspective, what had to change, adapt, or be elevated to meet the requirements for G20 and the standards there?
So maybe before we get to what we had to implement at the venue to upgrade it slightly for the purpose of the event, we were very honored when Minister Lamola took the stage at the media briefing, and he, out of his own, offered an explanation as to why they had selected Nasrec. And it's such a beautiful moment for me, because what he had explained is how Nasrec, in the years of segregation, served as a bridge between people from Soweto and people from the other suburbs.
Yes.
And them gathering at events together. That was the first venue where people came together from all walks of life, all races, all ages. And when he said that on stage, I had such a warm moment, because that's really what we represent as a precinct and as a venue. So there's that legacy that sits behind the venue. And funny enough, the selection criteria that actually won us the bid was not just because of the size of the venue. Yes, we are still the biggest in Africa in terms of the bulk space that we've got. But during the summit in Brazil, the presidents had quite a difficulty getting out of the plenary venue because you're dealing with these convoys. They had to wait for certain time slots for their vehicles to arrive. So some of them waited for 2 or 3 hours before they could depart from the plenary venue. And that was one of the non-negotiables from our president, saying that we have to be able to exit these presidents quickly. And because we've got in most of our venues 10 to 12 roller shutter doors, we basically redressed those so that countries had dedicated points where they would depart, and the departure went smooth and exceptionally quick. So something that we didn't even anticipate as a venue would be a value add to this project is something that was identified by the president and the security cluster. From a upgrading perspective, to put things into the right context. So when the venue was acquired in 2019 by an international group, they had at that point already committed to invest a certain amount of money to upgrade and to revamp the facilities. Right. But as we know, COVID came and there was a long period of recovery, so that put a little bit of a handbrake on the process. Yeah. And from there, the group shareholders, they were actually looking for a project of substantial nature to justify revamping the facilities. So the JEC revamp was actually done on our own account. It wasn't as a prerequisite for hosting the event. But looking at the condition of the facilities and that some of the facades, some of the fitments interior had become quite dated, we knew that the time was right, and it's something that we had to do. So the refurbishment project itself was almost to the same scale as G20 because we had 14 weeks to refurbish a venue the size of Nasrec. And to put it into perspective, our premises spans 52 hectares. Many people don't know that. And within the 52 hectares, if we work it from the outside inward, we had to replace things, or we decided to replace things like our perimeter fence and all our gates. Our perimeter fence is 3.2 kilometers long. And from there, we worked to the inside of the venue where we recolored all of the buildings. So for people that haven't been to Nasrec in a while, it's now no longer brown. It is a beautiful industrial gray, the entire site. We replaced all of our external lights, our internal lights. We refurbished all of our conference centers from floors to walls to ceilings to lights to air conditioning. We've rebuilt all of our bathrooms, which we have 130 of. So that itself was not a small feat to accomplish to make sure that it's done and it's ready on time. And we also decided to implement some more technology and energy savings kind of products, like upgrading the lights that we use within the halls. We now have these really great LED lights that we switch off and we monitor on our phones. So something that we've never had at the venue before.
Wonderful.
So it was really a huge project for us to tackle, and the team took it on so well because initially the ops team got the fright of we have to revamp this massive space while the commercial team was dealing with the fright of we have to plan for G20. So we had to almost divide and conquer to make sure both get delivered.
And in terms of international benchmarks that you had to meet?
With G20, thankfully, each venue sort of has its own flavor in how they set it up. Okay. So a lot of the G20s get hosted in fixed facilities. Some of them, and I'm not going to name the country because I'm going to get it wrong, but one of the G20s that we actually went and researched, they had taken a circular building that had an opening, so it had no roof. It was just like a circular structure of buildings. And then they put a canvas in the middle of it to cover it like a tent, to create the plenary structure. And then inside, they also cladded it in such a way that you could not see it's a temporary structure. Oh, that's amazing. And speaking to the team from Protocol who had attended the G20 before South Africa, they shared a lot of details with us in terms of quality of food or bathroom facilities and where they felt improvements could be made. So it was more about capturing what they wanted to deliver as a South African venue and placing us on the map than really comparing to international standards, if I can call it that.
That's wonderful. I mean, it just shows you that, world-class events expose the true maturity of a venue's systems, right? It's not just about its size. And I love the way you utilized the venue and how you used the opportunity to upscale it. It was in the plans. I mean, that we know, and COVID obviously did a number on everybody, but that just, this event actually just moved it a little bit faster for the benefit of the entire eventing community within South Africa and the continent, because now we have an upscaled venue that I'm sure everybody will be looking forward to using. And I can only see so many opportunities ahead for great use. So that's really exciting. But now, I mean, as a leader, leading this, right? And behind every successful event is a leadership team carrying enormous pressure. And often it's very quietly as well. And knowing you, I sense that with very little room for error. As a CEO, how did you lead your team through an event where the margin for error was essentially zero?
Firstly, by the grace of God, it's you need a lot of faith and a lot of calmness, as you said, to get through something like this. And in this event, I was a CEO turned project manager. I believe in getting on the ground with the teams, because it's the only way to ensure that you understand where certain challenges sit and exactly how to resolve it for them.
Yeah.
So in that project management capacity, what's probably most important is to understand that you need to not be just a task tracker, but you need to be there as the main problem solver for whatever needs to be modified, or when the team hit a panic, you need to be able to resolve it for them. And you need a certain level of maturity in your leadership style in these projects to know when to apply pressure and when to give support.
Yeah.
And in these projects, what I found is it's not the time to reprimand if people are doing the wrong thing or they've made mistakes, because they are in such a state of panic, wanting to deliver this flawlessly for your sake, for the sake of the reputation of the venue and the country, that there's a different time after a project to sit and say, okay, how do we do this differently next time? But in those moments, you cannot be the leader that puts more pressure, because they have got enough pressure and they fully understand what the pressure entails.
Yes.
Besides from that, we had a wonderful support structure in all of our subcontractors. It's difficult to mention specific names, but one gentleman in specific, Victor Besser, is from the GL Events team. And he's worked in South Africa before, but he comes from the international projects in GL, so working on functions like COP. And we were lucky enough that he stepped in as the infrastructure project manager, and he unbottled a lot of the pressure, a lot of the issues that we had, because he's been through it before, if not worse. So leaning on our supplier network, and that is a critical point for these events, is that you have to have a supplier network that you've got experience with.
Yes.
And that you absolutely trust to the fullest, that when they take something on, you know they will deliver it correctly, again at the correct price and within the correct time frames. And within the complexity of this event, the suppliers that stood out was definitely the infrastructure partner, which was GL Events. Sound Headquarters, as the AV provider, did an absolutely amazing job with what they had to deliver and the quality at which they had to deliver. And then also the catering provider. And with that, also our security company, who helped a lot in planning certain elements and giving advice as to what would work and what would be obstructive. So main event catering, they did an absolutely amazing job delivering really detailed menus, and that in bulk as well. And then Bravo, who is our security provider, they also really supported us a lot leading up to and during the event. So that trusted network of suppliers and making sure everyone is informed, the communication channels are open. And then a personal story, and this was...
We'd love that.
This was really a moment for me after the event. I was sending out messages to a lot of the teams at DIRCO. And their communications director sent me a message back that just read thank you for being the calm in the storm of the calm voice in the storm of G20. And that really resonated with me because inside I was not calm at all. If anyone, it's like the duck that sits on the water and the feet are going crazy, but above water, it looks very calm.
Beautiful.
And I thought, I'm so glad that is how it translated, that they never actually saw the panic.
Yeah.
And I think as a leader, that is a critical thing that you need to be able to maintain in these projects. If you do hit the panic, and believe me, you will, at some point during a project like this, all the years of experience and expertise leaves your body and you do hit a panic. But not showing that to your team or your client is what ultimately keeps everyone calm and keeps them in a position of, okay, if she thinks it's okay, we're going to make it. So very important.
It is. Yeah. And I so agree with you about having that trusted network. Your team is the first point of call, having a team, bringing in members of the team that have the expertise, that where you have those resources that have dealt with events like it. And I think leaning in on your international team bode very well for you as well. Because, you're fatigued, it's stressful. But again, having that team to support you from your supplier network to your internal teams, to your international teams, really helps you to swim gracefully, right? Whilst the feet are paddling below. But I think it's, leadership during these global events and these massive events. If for any organizer out there, it's about, like you're saying, the clarity, the calm, and the trust that you have with those teams and your stakeholders. It's not always about control, right? It's about learning to let go and step in, like you said, when you're needed, when the problem solving is needed. And you're very fortunate to be able to have all of that at your beck and call. I think that's really wonderful. And talking about collaboration, right, and stakeholders, how critical was collaboration with government, the security agencies, your international stakeholders now as well, to the success of the summit? Because it wasn't just about your local team here that was operating behind the scene. It's you in a global event like this. You don't belong to a single organization, right? It's about collaboration between venues and government and security agencies. So how did you manage that?
That was definitely a critical point that we had to navigate very carefully. As I mentioned earlier on, you have this risk of a domino effect should you give more attention to one work stream than to the others. From an international perspective, we were lucky enough that the Department of International Relations took care of all of the protocol management. Okay. So they had an event manager on board called Marcel Henderson, wonderful at what he does. And he basically dealt with all of the delegations that wanted to come for site visits, because you do have, prior to these events, a couple of weeks out, different countries coming to scope the site to determine the suitability for where their president would be stationed, where their ministers are going, what their dietary requirements are. Are they in any means physically impaired? How's their movement? How close is the bathrooms to where their seat is going to be? And with the G20 and the amount of nations that came through, these were regular visits that were conducted to at the venue. And we were thankful that he was able to handle that, so that we would not be in a situation of answering something that maybe we were not supposed to say.
Okay.
Yeah, because the guys do try and take a chance and ask things that maybe they shouldn't be asking at that point. The collaboration between all of the local, national, provincial, city, the whole public sector level was at a complexity that I've yet to experience. So because we had to give a lot of assistance to DIRCO as our main client with who they had to liaise with certain things around the precinct. And I have worked with public sector entities all my whole working career. But when you have to start breaking something down in terms of, okay, we need to fix something outside the gates. then there's one entity working on the road, someone else has to fix the lights, someone else is responsible for the water, someone else is responsible for the grass, the fencing.
That's true.
So even within those work streams, where you had one work stream, you would have 5 other government entities that needed to deliver to get that work stream to its end goal. And if you think about 12 to 14 work streams and then 5 pockets below each of them, that's what the complexity came down to. And in all of those, again, you have to go back and consider, is this to the satisfaction of the security cluster? Because it basically sits, I'm not going to say the final decisions, but to a certain extent, the final decision sits with them to say, yes, what you want to do is okay, but is it functional? And from a security perspective, is it going to be best? So that coordination, we had to tread carefully. And when I say we, it's me and my entire team, because as one person, I could not sit in all of the meetings. And the team did an exceptional job of taking on board. They each had 3 or 4 work streams that they had to manage, and then coordinating amongst those stakeholders and coordinating amongst themselves internally and back to their suppliers. So I wonder if it would be possible for us to ever determine the amount of emails, WhatsApps, phone calls, and meetings that happened as a result of just the Heads of State Summit. And I mean, G20 in its totality, we had over 132 events in South Africa last year because of G20. But it must have been the biggest communication exercise that anyone has ever conducted internally and externally, because we would be on the phones 24/7. And the communication channels, keeping the stakeholders all talking to each other and talking to you, that is critical, absolutely critical.
Yeah. And what about managing confidentiality and protocol? That must have also been a lesson to learn there.
Our staff, thankfully, the ones that were at the forefront, it's not their first rodeo, if I can call it that.
Right.
We've done projects like AGOA together, multiple local political events, and again, the Ministerial Summit. So leading up to the event, we sat everyone down, including our stakeholders, including our suppliers, and we informed and briefed everyone that this is not something that you discuss at home with your friends, even with other clients. What we are about to deliver cannot be exposed on any platforms. No, they were not allowed to take pictures, and no one did. Amazingly enough, there was no leakage of footage before the event as to this is how it's going to look, which that was a big stress factor for me.
I'm sure.
So we never had to go around telling people, please take that off your profile or don't put that on Facebook. And that for me was fascinating in this day and age, because people must have been very tempted.
Yes. And considering the number of people you have on site during that period, I mean, it's across the board. It's massive, and trying to control all of them. And sometimes human nature prevails.
So I suppose it goes back to the trust that you mentioned earlier, and that for me is it's a special thing at Nasrec, that we've built this over how many years? Probably most of our suppliers 15, 20 years. The staff, someone new, some have been there for the same amount of time, but it shows you that the way that they respect and take the business to heart translates into these kind of events. They don't talk about it, not for fear of being reprimanded or for the action that follows, but because they know that what they love and where they work, that is what is at risk. So it's I'm really impressed with everyone that they maintained it the way they did.
Yeah, that's super impressive, and it's a very proud moment for you and your team. And all the stakeholders that were involved there as well. Because ultimately, no venue delivers events of the scale alone, right? There are multiple teams that form part of this ecosystem, and they all matter. And establishing that trust, which you have a authentic way of doing, allows for that ecosystem to work more effectively. So that's really, really great. Now, let's turn our attention to what this means for South Africa, right? And the continent as well. So beyond the operational success, moments like this shape how the world views our destination, and how confident global organizers as well are in bringing more of these high stakes events onto African soil. So what message does successfully hosting this now send out about South Africa and Africa?
First and foremost, I think it squashes the security myth about how safe is South Africa, and especially Johannesburg, because we do often get ridiculed for things that we are not even guilty of in terms of the safety.
Yeah.
So this event has definitely helped us to prove that we can manage events of this magnitude without having any incidents at all. And that speaks volumes, because often that is a deterrent for international organizers, whether it's a public events or whether it's private events. That does deter people from coming to South Africa to host. I think the positioning that we took for South Africa and really showcasing to people our culture, our hospitality, and how we receive people, that definitely spoke the loudest during G20.
Oh.
So the feedback, we switch on monitoring tools when we do events of this nature as the venue, so that we can track any negative or positive publicity and be able to deal with it accordingly. But a lot of the heads of state and a lot of the delegates had comments that this was one of the most beautiful G20s that they'd ever been to. And
wow.
Yes. what a huge
love
compliment.
That. I love that. That's massive.
And they also shared that when they went to other countries for G20, they had a sense that the hospitality was rehearsed in the way people approached them, in the way people spoke to them.
They were trained.
It was trained. Where in South Africa, I don't think we even thought of training people on that level necessarily, but it just came across as natural and genuine. And that actually gave them an even better experience with our country as to, but this is how they are day to day. So it's definitely put us on a platform where we've been recognized as a destination for business events and events of scale, and that we've got the capability to deliver exceptional projects. And I think for South Africa and for the rest of the African continent, it will definitely lead to more events of that nature and putting us in a better position when we are bidding for the next big economic events or big sporting events. So it's really, it's exciting for NASREC, we're known as NASREC, JEC,
yes,
to be at the forefront of that, and that we were able to actually put the country in such a good standing and the industry in its totality to be able to generate business for everyone in the sector and ultimately have a better economic impact from these events coming into our country.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of the industry. I think we are all so grateful to you and your team at the Johannesburg Expo Centre, because ultimately this is a stepping stone for us, right? Credibility in our services as a country and as a continent is both by delivery and your execution, you and your team, the way you've executed this is aspirational, it's inspirational. It is so many things all built into one, but ultimately it's about the delivery. As aspirational as it is, we all want to host these events, but the actual delivery and the way it was executed has built such confidence, like you're saying, in our capabilities for the event industry in South Africa. So we are truly grateful. We are truly grateful. And talking about that, legacy and future impact, once the delegates leave, like we're saying, the headlines fade. But what truly matters is what remains in the capabilities and the confidence and the long-term positioning of the country, of the continent, of your venue as well, and your teams. So beyond the headlines, what lasting impact that hosting the G20 had for the Johannesburg Expo Centre? What would you say that would be?
So from the team's perspective, I think they've definitely become a lot more resilient to operate under pressure. We have a very lean team in the venue, probably one of the leanest in the country in terms of our permanent staff complement. And they really took the opportunity on board to upskill themselves. They've taken these new capabilities and applied it to projects that have already followed G20.
Oh, wonderful.
And I think that's the beauty of a project like this, is that the legacy does live within people beyond the delegates leaving the country. People now have this experience of, if I can do a G20, I can do anything. And I do believe that that's probably the holy grail for South Africa right now. So for the teams, it's changed them and their adaptability and flexibility. And from a venue perspective, we know in the South African events industry, we are always having this debate about build-up times and breakdown times and how quickly we can turn venues.
Yes.
Because if we are honest with ourselves, we are not yet on par with how international venues can turn in terms of how quickly they can convert from one event to another.
Mm-hmm.
So unbeknown to a lot of people, we hosted G20. It ended on the Sunday. We had 3 simultaneous events incoming the weekend after it in 3 different facilities, which means that we had to dismantle the whole G20 construction that took us 3 months in 4 days. And at the same time build for the High Rocks Fitness event, the Soweto Marathon, and a Citadel, which Citadel is like it's an international indoor music festival.
Yes.
And they all opened on time, which I sat back and looked at the team, and that's when it dropped for me that they definitely took the learnings of G20 and working under pressure with speed and accuracy. They took it on board and they managed to deliver.
That is truly remarkable. 3 months build up, 4 days breakdown. Anything is possible in this industry. Anything is possible. But like you're saying, you built a team that is cohesive, that understands the needs of the industry, that understand the needs of the international events, and then, also respects the local organizers and corporates that want to host events at your venue. So no matter who you are, there's that level of respect and understanding of what they want to achieve and ensuring that they will do everything possible to make them achieve that. And that's how we all need to operate in this industry. So you must be very proud.
Absolutely, very proud. Honored and proud. And I think for the rest of the industry in South Africa, people should use G20 as a case study, whether they were involved in it or not, because it's for all of us as an industry. So when we're reaching out to internationals, it's a good starting point to say, but did you know when we hosted G20, this is what we actually delivered?
Yeah.
Because none of the G20 events, not just the one held at Nasrec, did we pick up a lot of negative PR or media negative comments. So for the events industry, reaching out to internationals, use it as a point of credibility to say, but we actually have done this already. So it can assist people in a lot of the comments or concerns that international clients would normally bring to the table. Use it as a reference to say, but we have done this. There's no reason why we cannot assist you in your event.
Now, as we close this conversation, and I'm sure you're going to get lots of questions after this, and I know you're always open to assisting and helping and guiding, what advice would you give to venues and organizers across Africa who aspire to host events at this level?
Maybe some, let me call it wayward advice or unexpected advice is don't try and compete with what's available internationally. If you think of a person that sits in a heads of state position or a ministerial position, they have seen all of the fancy, glossy, high-end, beautiful venues. They've been there, they've traveled the world. And as Africa, we've got such a unique positioning in the vibrancy of our colors, our cultures, the patterns that we use. And often because we see that day to day, we tend to get used to it and we think, oh no, we have to do it to the international standards. But you have to find a balance of presenting your venue or your event, your project in a way that still includes that heritage and includes what we really stand for, instead of trying to compete with the Singapores of this world. We are completely different in culture in terms of the way we do certain things, the way we present certain things. And I think for the African continent and even in South Africa, we need to keep that in mind, that yes, it is about giving a premium look and feel. It does not mean that it has to look like a first world country. We can bring our own flavor to it. And that's actually what delegates receive as authentic. And in events, I think the trends, we are moving a lot more towards people wanting authentic experiences.
Yes.
They don't want to have things that feel rehearsed and set up to look a certain way when that is not how they experience the country itself. Because they're coming into the country only for a couple of days and they might only be coming to your venue and going to the hotel. So that's the only time you really have to showcase what we've got to offer, and we should fully lean into that.
Mm.
And from the G20 perspective, again, looking at how DIRCO positioned the country in the bilateral rooms, in the country offices that they created, I was so proud to walk through those spaces, and the footage that they featured were these gigantic cheetah prints and elephants and stelitzias and proteas, and it really resonated with Africa. It wasn't trying to showcase anything that these heads of state would have seen at another, again, event of international importance before.
So don't try and be a me too or copycat of another international event. Make sure you bring the local flavor in there, because that's what gives you the uniqueness, right?
It absolutely makes a huge difference if you can present it like that, and clients actually latch onto it. I think international people want to know more about Africa. How do we do certain things? What do we eat? What entertainment? Because it's not a continent that is as exposed to the rest of the world. And it's take that uniqueness and understand how to present it to an international customer instead of trying to compete toe-to-toe with countries that are a lot more fortunate than us in terms of their economic capacity or where they sit with their tourism industries. We need to be ourselves, and we need to translate that to the rest of the world.
What are the things you think we shouldn't underestimate when we're trying to host global events, at this kind of level? What are the three things? What are the top three things, let's say, you would say that we shouldn't underestimate?
So from a private entity perspective, we should not underestimate how much government support we need when delivering these kind of events, and not just focused on the national department that is bringing the event, but the support that you need from the entire local setup, be it city power or even our closest police station is one of our closest allies because they sit within the venue operations center. And our relationship with them is extremely important when we have to deliver these events. So when you're working with these events, you cannot just focus on the senior people within the departments or the national departments. You have to have a good network across all of the players that sit in your immediate community. So don't underestimate that part. From a supplier perspective, you need to ensure that you trust your suppliers and that you have verified them in terms of, you might have worked with someone for 10 years, only to realize that when it comes to an event of this nature, they don't have the necessary capability. Okay. So don't underestimate the complexity of all of the smaller moving parts, because even things like branding become a very critical thing in this event. There's no room for mistakes. There's no room for, we don't have capacity to produce further. So that supply network, again, is very important. And then I think thirdly, don't underestimate yourself. If you're in a leadership position in these entities, I think it's important to be able to, even as the CEO, the head of the business, the title doesn't really matter, to be able to put your hand up when you see that things are going wrong and you do not know how to solve them. So it's important sometimes to pack away the ego and say, for the sake of this project and for the sake of the country and delivering it properly, who do I need to bring in as experts and who do I need to consult to make sure that I can deliver this effectively, which I think is probably one of the most difficult things in leadership, is when you get to a point of admitting, I don't know. I don't have the answer right now. So I would say the other critical thing there is don't be shy to put your hand up and ask for help when you're stuck.
Absolutely. So, ultimately, global readiness is not just built on one person trying to bid for an event. It's ensuring that you have the right stakeholders in place and knowing where to lean in and where to pull back and establish the trust and the confidence in the team. So what you put forward, you can say that confidently you are ready to host this global event in your country. That is amazing. Adele, thank you so much for this amazing conversation. It's really been insightful. I know we've chatted often, but we've never had the time to get into the detail. I'm really feel privileged. I really feel privileged to have the opportunity to hear this first. And for sharing with us what it truly takes to deliver events of such significance. I really, really appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to everyone in the industry that participated in making G20 overall a success, not just the summits on our side, but across the board. I think I commend the entire business events industry in South Africa for all of the different pockets of events that they set up. It was, I think, a magical moment in our industry to see how everyone, competitors even, came together and delivered it. And yeah, thank you for this platform. We really appreciate it.
No, always a pleasure. Well, hosting the G20 was more than an operational success. It was a statement of capability, leadership, and success. To all our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, and I'm sure it did, share it with your teams, your boards, your partners. These are the conversations that move our industry forward, and it is so important that we can spread the word so that we can empower our teams. And of course, make sure you keep following Africa Event Connect wherever you listen to your podcasts, and join us as we continue connecting Africa's event leaders, venues, and ideas, one conversation at a time. I'm Projeni Pather. Thank you so much for listening.